So welcome everyone. Happy April. Happy snowy April. I'm gonna let's start with just getting a timekeeper and a minutes taker if we could. Would someone be willing to be the timekeeper and keep us on track today? Chase, thank you. Minutes taker, would anyone be willing to take minutes?
Try that.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah,
Sure.
great, thank you. And so we have quorum, we have everyone except for Cecilia. Does anyone know if Cecilia's?
You just sent a
No.
email saying she's on another meeting and.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. So we're only down Cecilia now, but hopefully she can place a little bit. And we have Sam joining. Hi, Sam.
Hello.
Great. Did everyone have a chance to review February's minutes? And does anyone want to make any adjustments, amendments to those minutes?
These are written by Wright, correct? Thanks for that.
So we can blame him
They're
if we.
quite lengthy and thorough, so I like them.
I don't know about thorough, but lengthy.
Lengthy and cryptic. That's what we want.
Well, there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. All right. All in favor of what is the word that you use? Approving. Oh, sorry, still a little jet lag. Of approving February's minutes.
Want a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Yeah.
Right, moves.
Okay, all in favor?
I'll second that. Not, we're all in favor. Okay.
Okay. Great. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? I'm sorry, there was one that I. Was there, does anyone know if there was one?
item.
There's one item?
Which Brad reminded me of, so it's the open meeting thing, you.
Oh, yeah, on,
Details,
I believe the 17th, Wednesday. Is that right?
April 17th at noon.
Yeah, I
it's a
feel you-
Wednesday.
You got a note from Josh or Duncan.
Yes, to sign up, you have to create an account with the Vermont Leagues of City and Towns, and then you have to wait for them to approve for you to be a member, and then you can sign up.
No.
Wow.
A two-step process.
Wow.
Yes, I'm.
And is it a webinar?
Yes,
Well, good to know, because I thought I just assumed I signed up.
Mm,
I thought I was on track to do it.
you have
Thanks.
to make
I
an
didn't
account,
realize.
and then when they approve you as your account, then you can sign up.
Oh,
Melissa,
you
do you,
sound very open.
Melissa, do you know if you have to be present or if they're gonna have a recording?
I can-
Seems
Might
pretty
be on there,
inconvenient for
might be
people
on
with
the list.
jobs. Yeah, I'll check it out. Okay.
Oh, thanks, Melissa, for
So-
that.
So who's planning on attend, were you planning to attend? You can be our representative
Yeah.
and Brad, were you planning on attending?
Yeah,
also?
yeah,
We are.
yeah, I'd like to try to get the concepts. You know, maybe not necessarily memorize every, chapter and verse, but to get the theories down, because I think that alone would guide us. I don't think it's all that complicated, actually. It's just, when you can, about quorums and communication between people,
Mhm.
when that steps over the line. Okay.
And I would add that, Melissa and I met with the town manager about, the utility right-of-way issues. And, I then followed up with an email to him that he was going to forward to the town attorney concerning, well, if there's a second, I can, in the agenda, I can go over it. Or I can do it now, whatever.
Go ahead. We should be okay on time if you want to do that now, right?
Sure. So they created a bridge with very high concrete, they're called waste blocks, or I call them waste blocks. And when they were done with the bridge, they removed the cross members of the bridge, removed the bridge, but left the abutments there. And it's in my mind, a hazard in the forest for someone to walk off the edge of either side. Or they're gonna fall into the stream, and I've asked the utility if they would like to move them out of the way, remove them, and they said no. And that was one matter, and the other matter was The old Vast Trail goes well north of the right of way on the western edge of the property. And now with their big utility road they have, and the utility road they've installed on the adjoining landowner, Mike Kelly. It'd be great if they stopped using the land north of the right of way, because the committee several years ago had VYCC come in and install water bars on that portion of the old Vast Trail, and the utility vehicles basically have washed them out. And so it's, I don't think they need to use it. So those are trying to get some legal help on that we could bring back to the committee to see what our options are.
Thanks. Yeah, great. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Did they give a reason for not wanting to take the blocks?
They didn't, it's their right of way, the utility right of way, they control it.
Yeah.
They didn't feel they needed to. They didn't say they weren't unsafe. They just didn't want to remove them. They might
You had a great idea of asking them to unstack them and just
Yeah.
put them down.
put them on. Right.
We're into the public comment period now.
Okay,
Couple
thanks, Chase.
minutes.
So we can recognize Sam Pratt and Lisa Miller being present online, no one physically present, no public.
Right, was that?
Yep.
Okay, great.
That's it. I haven't heard back from the town manager.
Okay, great, thanks.
When I do, I'll share it.
Okay. And Sam and Lisa and anyone else who joins us, obviously at the end of every item, we do want to save some time for public comment. So feel free to do that or raise your hand electronically and we will see you. And oh, good, we have a little magical thumbs up there. Great.
Awesome.
And looks
Thank
like
you.
Cecilia is joining us.
Like he's
now.
flicking something.
I know, trying to light the lighter. Great. So we're on to agenda item B, which is consideration of applicants for vacant ACFC seats, including input from RTC, RCC, and recommendations for co-chairpersons. So what our objective is to make a motion to recommend action to the select board based on, is this right? Just myself and Wright? Those were the only two.
Yeah, you've been away. I can summarize what's happened in the last month. So applications were closed with 2 applications, one from Wright and one from you, Daniel. So 2 applications to fill vacancies, which by incumbents. Of course, we've had a unfilled vacancy for some time, and there were no applicants for that. And that process, of course, happened some time ago to give time for the Trails Committee and the Conservation Commission to make comments. The Conservation Commission didn't, according to their minutes. Let's assume they still support Daniel as their representative.
I've not heard otherwise.
The Trails Committee met but didn't have a quorum. Well, Chase would know about that. There were 4 people present, which is way below. But I got an email from the co-chair, I think that was from Alison Aiken, saying that those present, although not a quorum, support the 2 applications. So I think we're in good, unless this committee has comments, we're probably in good shape for a motion or motion with amendments.
Yeah, and or if anyone from the public would like to comment on this.
Oh, good.
So you would need a motion to
To approve them,
extend the terms or the.
to bring it to the select board, yeah.
Recommendation.
Recommendation, yes. It would be like a motion to recommend myself and Wright to the vacant positions.
I do that. I'd make a motion that we recommend to the select board that Daniel Schmidt and Wright Preston be named to the vacant seats, I guess, right?
Yep.
The expired terms
Mhm.
For the, for the terms of of those seats. In our particular.
I'd second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm gonna abstain.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna say aye for right.
Oh, you do it.
Yeah, we could have two.
Do we have a,
motions.
do we have a, do we have enough votes without us?
Six.
Yeah,
Yep.
maybe we do two motions.
We have enough.
Cecilia.
Yeah, and
was
Cecilia as
voting
well.
in favor.
Great.
Should we do two votes formally?
I think we're okay. Yeah. Great, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So there is apparently, according to our bylaws, but not necessarily according to normal practice in the town. We should also, maybe before the motion, I should have mentioned this, we can also request the select board to appoint chairs or co-chairs of this committee. So we might want to have a discussion about maybe an additional motion.
You mean for the
So
whole town forest
That's
committee?
the bylaw is that the select board appoints and not the committee doesn't name its own chair
We recommend they appoint.
for chair, huh?
And is that an annual cycle? So is that coming up right now?
Right.
Oh, right, because I joined on when, right, we were not in
Yeah.
a normal cycle. Okay, I got it.
So that's another difference with a lot of committees, but good to know.
So we need to make a motion to recommend an appointment.
Is that what you're doing, or?
Well, would you like, are you ready to go? I would be happy to.
Are there any, would anyone like to discuss anything?
Usually after the motion,
Mhm.
then there's an opportunity
Oh,
to
okay.
discuss before we vote.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah, usually it's moved and seconded and then discussion, right? And then we vote. So I'll second it.
I'll second that. Did you say Ian?
Daniel.
Oh,
Ian's
Dan.
not.
Okay. All right,
Ian's
thank
not
you.
up You're not up for, being reappointed.
For chair.
I think both of us.
You are.
I think we
Yeah,
both
we
are,
both.
right, yeah.
Ian Stokes. Both.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
I would just want to thank them for doing a great job so
Seems to
far.
work well. Yeah, from my perspective.
Yeah.
Cecilia, can you try talking again? We just didn't hear you. I saw your lips move.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now? Should
Oh,
I shout?
interesting.
Can-
Okay, so we can't hear you, but
I'll say yes. I can type. I can type.
There we go.
okay, nope, we got
We
you.
got
We got you. The speaker just was off.
Okay.
And then I turned it up very loud just as you were talking, so.
Our mistake. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
No, I just wanted to thank you both and you've been doing a great job. So it would be grateful that if you guys would consider doing it again to be co-chairs.
Is that your pleasure? If appointed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ian, would you agree to be, are you interested in
That's
being
great.
co-chairs?
I'm with hesitation, I'll agree. How's that?
On my account? Just kidding.
Cool.
Okay, well, we have our motion.
But if anybody else is willing.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nays? Nays, okay. Recommendation stands. Great,
Good,
on to
thanks.
agenda item C. So this has to do with the bylaws, and this is something that Ian, myself, and Chase were like struggling with a little bit right before I left, which is that the big picture is that we have some kind of funky bylaws. And some of those bylaws might make sense given the context of our committee. Other bylaws maybe don't make sense and maybe need to be changed or are just kind of tricky. So the one we were dealing with is that the bylaw says that the representative from the RTC and the RCC has to be present for there to be a quorum, for there to be a vote on a motion. Which means that both Chase and I would need to be present at every meeting in which there is a voting action item. Yeah, right, which is like, which was inconvenient when I had to be gone the one meeting of like, since, I don't know, I think it was the only meeting I've missed since I've been on this committee, and it's like, you know, it's just an undue burden to Chase and I, and it's also inconvenient to move things forward for all of us as a committee. I don't think we're so valuable that you all couldn't make decisions without us here. So what we'd like to do is set up, get a few people to set up a work group to work with the town manager and the select board to change the bylaws. And so we don't need to change anything today. All we do is just get some folks to say, yep, I will work with them to look at the bylaws, and whether we sort of look at what bylaws are of other committees and just try to align those, or we keep our own sort of like special bylaws, but kind of take out some of the things that we think don't work well. It's up to that working group to make recommendations and then bring it back to this committee.
Yeah, Brad and I had a sub-forum discussion, and Brad had I thought some good comments, if you'd like to raise them again now.
Yeah, I hadn't realized, I saw the thing about the working group and I didn't see that the town manager would be involved. But what I started, kind of asking, well, should we be writing our own bylaws? Should it be more of an independent voice out there that would work with the town manager? Somebody who's, knows the committee structures in the town and how things go. And then that person that at some point, would bring that a draft maybe to us, so we could comment on it, but only comment. And then let the select board do it.
I
And
think we
started-
could make some recommendations to.
Yeah,
Though,
and
with
contribute.
Josh, and then I think he would pass that on to the select board. They would,
Yeah.
I don't think we could just change it with Josh, probably, right? That would probably
Yeah.
go for that.
But I think that's a good idea, Brad, for this working group to explore.
Yeah.
Is like, what, because I don't even know, like, do the committees create their own bylaws, or, so I think even figuring out that process is, we need to.
So
figure
maybe
out.
that would be a task for that working group you're
Yeah.
thinking of,
Yeah,
and then
totally.
hand it off to somebody to actually do the.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just like to figure out what we need to do to change them, I think is kind of the charge for that working group.
Yeah,
Could it be worth a shot at, I like what you're saying, Brad, that it doesn't need to be from us. What if we did a motion that we wanted to change that one rule? And just told the town, emailed the town manager and anyone else that would be helpful and said, we made this motion.
Mhm.
Would you be up for proposing, and just hand it off to them, proposing a rule change that could help us with this situation? To the select board? Yeah,
We could do that. The only other thing I was thinking is there's that other bylaw in which there is like confusion around appointees from the RTC and the RCC. Remember we went through that like a few months ago about like,
Yeah.
and so I agree that we could do that. That would be like would solve this one problem. And then I'm like, but how do we solve those other things? Do we do it all at once?
I think Bob Lowe has brought up, and I can't remember what they are, but some discrepancies between the management plan and the bylaws, so it may be more than just that one
Okay.
quirk,
I like your idea, though,
No.
just to separate out that one quick thing.
I know, I like that too. Cause then if we were able to do that, then we could just move forward with
That's
the
true.
change, and then we could get into the like, because it's gonna take months and months to get through all the sticky stuff, and maybe this is an easy thing we can just like check off the list so that we can get quorum and we're not chasing around like.
I bet I was on the committee when this particular item was brought up, and I don't think we intended it. I can't imagine we intended that you both or your prior representatives
Right.
had to be at every meeting. That just doesn't make any sense at all.
Right.
Because
I think I was on the committee too, and I think that was Hannah's concern, the whole idea of even having people recommended by the Trails Committee and the Conservation Commission. I think it was the idea of keeping it, transparent, that no one set of interests would have like a structural advantage over the other. And I don't know, I don't think that we meant that you would have to be the actual member who's on the other committee. It was supposed to be whoever was appointed in those places. So there's supposed to be 2 seats appointed by them. So that would give some options. That's what I recall as the intent. So Hannah was really trying to, balance these different points of views and making sure by the bylaws that they were balanced every time a decision was made. So that at least a perspective would be in the room, even if that I think was the plan. But if it doesn't read that way now, and it makes you think you guys both have to be in the room all the time, then I agree with Wright. That was certainly not the intent.
What it says, I can just read real quick. It says a majority of voting members of the ACF committee, but no fewer than 5 members shall constitute a quorum. And this is the tricky part. So we want a period there. And instead there's a comma and it says, including at least 1 member from the RCC and RTC.
So it says members, not appointed.
Right.
not
Yeah.
appointed.
When we discussed it, I thought she meant members appointed by the RCC or the ones recommended. I don't even know. We have that concern about appointing versus recommending, but
Right.
at any rate, I think it's a good thing to change, but that's not what we intended to be that restrictive. But I was just trying to explain the rationale, and apparently
Totally, and I totally see the spirit of that,
Mhm.
of what it was written in. I appreciate that. I think we've like sort of have that spirit of collaboration without needing to have this sort of specific about the quorum. So I think it would be smart to make that motion of striking that conjunction from the bylaws, and then in addition forming a working group that can then get into the weeds about some of the other things in our bylaws.
We can revisit it if RCC forms a supermajority. Then proposes a bunch of legislation that pushes RTC out of the picture.
Yeah. And that's what we were trying to.
Yeah.
Daniel, to be here. Let's stick it to the owls at the next.
Yeah. Owl hunting season.
With dogs.
One thing,
You're
I remember, but I don't remember all the details, that Bob Lowe contacted me, I think at the time when we were, this committee had vacancies and applicants for the vacancies, and Bob Lowe told me that, as he serves on the Conservation Commission, and he said that as he'd observed, he'd noticed a contradiction between the management plan that controls this committee and the bylaws. And his opinion, because he really gets into these kinds of things, is that the management plan supersedes the bylaws. So the bylaws should be consistent with the management plan. So unfortunately, I don't remember all the details, but it should be in an email that I could dig out, and that could be resolved maybe at the same time.
Yeah, once we get the working group, we can get them that information.
Yeah.
So maybe first, let's just see, is there anyone who'd be willing to help out be on that working group? Melissa, okay. And I'll do that as well. Since I've read those so many millions of times. Anyone else? I mean, we can do, Melissa and I can do it. That's fine. Great.
And the objectives, I think, have been spelled out. It's essentially to address the quorum issue, potentially also the issue that Bob Lowe has raised that I just mentioned.
Well, and so now, and we can make a motion to recommend that the select board remove the item in 3A. I'm waiting so Brad can get this down.
You're doing handwritten notes.
So go on then. It's a sharp pencil. Oh, you got a pen.
Right.
In 3A of removing the text, including at least 1 member from the RCC and RTC. So it would read, Brad, you don't have to write this, but it would read a majority of voting members of the ACFC committee, but no fewer than 5 members shall constitute a quorum, period.
That's 3C, right?
3C, yep.
3C.
3C.
Yep, 3C.
Did you have 3A then?
I had it, yeah. Looking over my shoulder.
No,
Is that how you got
well,
through
Daniel
school?
said 3A, but then I
Oh,
was
Oh, I did that. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Oh, Ian, we, oh, pull your sheet.
Yes, but that's not what happened.
So that's the text.
So if someone would be willing to make that motion.
Make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
All in favor? I,
Versus.
Aye.
And we should, I guess we should see that how Cecilia is
Yeah.
voting.
so, and maybe Cecilia is. Has stepped away. from
I'm
it.
trying desperately to unmute. It's giving me a hard time.
No worries.
There we go. Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you, Cecilia. All right. Motion passed. Great, great. Can we pass those cookies around? Can anyone give me a motion to
very
pass the
good.
cookies?
So,
Yeah.
and a couple wheat flour in them, so you can feel
I
good.
don't think that was,
They're really-
yeah.
I feel like these are the same cookies you made me before. Oh, they're different?
But on the same theme,
Those are so good.
yes.
Thank
Next
you
year-
so much.
Next year it'll be me that needs lessons.
Well, I'm glad you're eating cookies. That's why I muted so that I could eat a yogurt. I didn't want to eat in front of you on the big screen.
Around again, please
Wow.
keep them all.
Well, we're all gonna be eating now, Cecilia, so we can all just like chew together.
Yep.
Collective chewing of fun things. Okay. On to agenda item D. So this is a brief work group update. And so we have a number of working groups doing a variety of tasks. And this is just time, we have like a half an hour set aside for this, and we're a little bit above ahead of schedule, which is great. But this is a time where folks can just report out on what they're doing, so everyone knows. And we have it documented through our video. And we have this item is supposed to go till 7:10, and then we have our challenges conversation from 7:10 to 7:55. So just knowing that time, I'm just going to ask folks as they're reporting out, just keep an eye on time. I know there's like a lot of information and it's great to share, but also we want to make sure that we save both time and brain power for that last challenges conversation, because it'll be good for us to just have some brain energy for that.
Don't be offended if I'm like, speed it up there, Melissa.
When she's
We got it, we got it, we got it.
So the first item is the summer 2023 subcommittees combined report. I'm actually not sure which one that is, but does anyone know which?
Yeah, there were, last summer, there were two subcommittees that both presented
Oh,
separate
right.
recommendations for management plan revisions.
Is
Um,
that D1 subcommittees?
I think it's called Subcommittees, the PDF that you sent,
Yeah.
It should be.
and it starts with the CMP one, and then it goes to the trail one.
So I can share that on the screen.
Thanks, Ian.
And what is, what this current document is just a compilation of the two subcommittees, because one of them, these were subcommittees that were established by Nick Navarowski as chair of this committee. And they worked last summer and presented draft reports. And there was some overlap between them, and one of those subcommittees ended up with only one member, so we discussed rolling the two committees together. This text is just a compilation of the two draft reports. I put it together by just merging them into one. If there was an overlap, putting both into the same document.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pull that up.
Has anyone else worked on this besides you, Ian, or just were you the only one to work on that?
Well, the two subcommittees,
And the two subcommittee members, but
Julian, Melissa and me was one, and the other one was Chase and Caitlin.
Mhm.
So Caitlin, design from the committee.
But the
So
mashup,
4 people involved in this.
the mashup document is something that you made, Ian, and then he highlighted where he pulled from the one group and where he pulled from the other group. So it's actually really readable.
Mhm.
Okay, should be, here it is.
Perfect.
I think it's several pages,
Yeah,
but it's identifying with highlights which subcommittee authored each section.
What's the goal of the document?
well, I think even of this one
Yeah.
here, I think one of the ways that we might use this is in our challenges conversation. This really outlines a lot of the previous thinking of not just like the previous committees, but really lots of work of public input and sort of like outside expertise that has been brought into the process for a long time back, because it wasn't just like the committee members came up with this stuff, like this was brought in from lots of other sources. So I do think that this could be a really good guiding document for some of those challenges conversations where we say like, what is the outcome of this? Like, how are we going to manage this in the forest? And this has some really good sort of on the ground management techniques of things we might do, everything from establishing baseline data for public use and how we continue to monitor that, to new trail development, to education opportunities. Like, I think to me, this is a really great start at what eventually we would want to bring to the select board or bring to the community as well, and say, not just here's a map, but like, here's a really holistic look of how we envision the space being used. And this gets really granular. And I think in a good way that people would appreciate sort of being able to visualize that.
But this document, I would, the subcommittee members can comment maybe, but this doesn't represent a final resolution of anything, but these were the points that were discussed and the consensus that was achieved. Is that reasonable? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it should be revisited in some way as we assemble materials for the management plan revision.
Yeah. I mean, I think this document is our two committees' best attempt to respond to concerns that came out of the Camel's Hub meeting and other public interventions. So I think it would be useful to just note them. We don't have to read each and every word, but I think it'd be helpful to look at each topically and say what the intent was. Interestingly, your committee and our subcommittee, we sort of came to very similar conclusions separately. And that's why I think, Ian, it was so seamless really to marry this document the way that you did. So I don't know who wants to do it. I'm happy to do it, but we should probably just go over each little section here to note the way that it responds to concerns that had been expressed.
I mean, this was in the packet. We've had it in the packet, or the two subcommittee reports in the packet repeatedly. So I think it's really, the onus is on all committee members and public to have access to it to make comments, bring them to a meeting. I don't know if we have comment. This was in the packet. I don't know if we have comments at this point already, or whether that's got to be assigned as homework for a future meeting.
I thought go ahead again.
Well, yeah, and along with, I mean, all the materials that we're assembling for a management plan revision, this is one.
But I thought our challenge list sort of fed out of this. So, I mean, I could see going through the challenges and then referring back. Rather than making this the lead doc, because that to me feels like sort of starting all over again.
I guess, Brad, I'm thinking if we get deep into a challenge that was addressed in this, then, it'd be good for people, if people have looked over it, great, we don't need to like talk about it, but if people bring knowledge of what work was done to the challenges meeting, because this was an attempt at incorporating the feedback from the public engagement meeting, right?
Right.
And so it was an attempt to address the challenges. And
Not, well, no, this was done over a year ago. I'm thinking of the challenges that
Last summer.
we,
This isn't. from
well,
a year
okay,
ago.
last summer, but
It's not a year ago.
yeah, but the challenges we did 2 months ago or a month ago.
right, but I'm saying like, if the challenges aren't informed by knowing what work was already done, then we're just going in a circle.
Well, they were,
We'd lose all this.
but I think they were at least my challenge.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wanted to make
Informed by
sure.
What I saw in this document. So, which I think is, is great. Not to throw this away by any means. But when we talk about challenges, then I would jump back to this and see. That would help kind of frame what prompted the challenge, the hotspot we used to talk about.
And just as like a question, did everyone have a chance to read through these? So I think if we all read through them, we'll be familiar with it and we can like refer back to this and know that this is sort of a working document that we can use as a framework
Sure.
within the management plan if we want. And we know it's there. It's sort of a parallel document to our challenges conversation. So maybe what comes out of that challenges conversation is a modified version of this that addresses a lot of those questions that we have. And that would be great, right? Because that would sort of honor all the work that had been previously done, plus our collective work. And so,
I mean, I think maybe the agenda should have been organized a little differently because I guess now I'm realizing that this was challenges identified a year ago. This was addressing those challenges and they were listed in that task list for the subcommittees that the meeting drew up about a year ago. And then now at our month ago meeting, we identified other challenge lists. So really there may be, and that's now become challenges, questions, and then the task is to find answers to those questions or resolution of those. So this potentially has input for the second document. To me, it seems like this identifies challenges. We have a new challenge list. The two should be merged, and as much as possible, things that were recommended by these subcommittees could be used to inform the challenges that we've adopted just in the last month. And I see Cecilia has a
go ahead, Cecilia.
Yeah, sure. I guess a question and a comment. And so I think it's really useful to see this stuff written down that we want to, my assumption is these are all things we want to include in the management plan. Is that right? But I wasn't sure if these are just listing items that we have to address, that we'll have to elaborate on, or if this is the actual wording. Like I'm thinking, especially in the beginning, looking at, is this really our monitoring plan, or these are just some ideas related to a monitoring plan and we would flesh out what that would be or be more specific in the management plan. And then the allowable activities and stuff, they're obviously all proposals. I don't think we voted on them unless I missed something.
Right.
And
I agree, Cecilia. We need to do some work on that to get it like ready for submission. I think this is a draft version.
right. So I guess I'm trying to figure out where it goes. Is this just signaling to us what we have to start inserting when we're rewriting the management plan? And it would also be helpful, I think, if this is a public document and people see it, they're like, oh my God, we have to have our dogs on a leash. Who decided that? And it's like, well, this is what we're going to propose. And so I didn't know if it needed some more language about what exactly this set of words are and what we intend to use them for. Like whether we're going to drop this into the management plan or we're just signaling topics that we're going to address in each of the trail stewardship plan and the comprehensive management plan.
Yeah, I mean, when I read through it, there were parts that were organized that I was like, oh, I would put that in a different area, or I would move some things around, still keeping that, keeping the spirit of what's in there. So I think that we could put some header on there for the public that is, a title of like working draft of, like management plan revisions or something, you know what I mean? Something like that. So people know that these are ideas that the committee's working through. These are not like set in stone rules that are going to be given to the select board.
Yeah, although I would say that this document represents kind of conceptual ideas that if we were to agree on, we could hand off to that famous person who would do those revisions, because this resolves a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I don't think actually the TSP language is probably closer to actual management language than the Cmte stuff that we did, where we kind of brought recommendations back to the committee.
They had different goals, the two.
They had different goals to begin with, which is maybe one of the reasons. But also I just think there's a lot of overlap and agreement in here that would guide that person who was going to redo the management plan. So you could take what's in here conceptually and then write it in more appropriate management plan language. And I mean, it's kind of a chicken and egg. Do we do challenges first, or do we do what we agreed on first? I think if we did challenges, I might say, well, let's look at these, the what we agreed on document first. So we have it here in the agenda until 7:10. It'll take 10 minutes to go through what's in here. And I think it could be a good basis to then jump from there into the challenges section. I think the agenda was well structured. I think we should just dive in.
What, 10 minutes, are we gonna discuss all this? Because I've got a ton of problems with that I see in there.
Okay.
And I don't think that can go forward. It can go forward to the select board, maybe as the committee's work, as the subcommittee's work. But it's the committee.
Yeah.
There's some serious issues in there, and those are the things that raise the challenges to me.
Okay.
The quote, last month's challenge.
Yeah.
The hotspots.
Well, let's get them out. I mean, let's get in there. Let's start.
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Cecilia.
thought that was going to happen in the challenges discussion, and we were just reporting things back. And this is just the first of a few bullets for the work groups reporting, saying, look, here's what we did. So yeah, I have a substantive comment on it at some point whenever we get to that, but it seems like now you're just kind of reporting out, and we're also going to talk about a couple other things in our next 10 minutes. If I'm reading the agenda right, we could depart from it, of course.
I also want to, I'm a little confused, and I don't know if this is what you were alluding to as well, Cecilia, that going off a new document, like we have the TSP and we had the other notes, and I see what you're trying to do. Ian, you're trying to point out the common ground in both, but I worry a little bit about abandoning those documents when we've been waiting to just go through those. And the idea, like whatever edits we choose to make to the TSP, is that it is, we decided last summer as a committee that we wanted to have an appendicized, very clear stewardship plan, that so we could show the select board there is a plan for trail stewardship.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering why we're not just working off that, and we can use this as notes, but it seems like if we keep creating new documents, we're in an endless loop of rewording things. And
Better to have them back out again as they were TSP comprehensive. Just.
yeah, we do one, and then if we find that it's already been covered when we're doing the other, we're like, great, that's in there. We want to move it over. But I don't know. That's my thought, and I'm totally open to how you guys think about it. But I worry about like
Well, we spent an awful lot of hours on it, so I hear that there are tons of problems and issues, but I don't want to just throw out everything that our group literally met for hours and hours and hours, like weekly for like 2.5 hours every week for a lot of the summer. So it represents a substantial amount of work. So
I totally agree with that. And that's why I kind of think that like, I think we have to think about this on two different levels. This document is sort of at the 10,000 foot view, whereas the challenges conversation is much higher, right? And it's much more expansive. And so I think that there's an opportunity to kind of separate out like the work that we did and any like sort of personal vested interest, and have the hard conversation about points of conflict and then let that inform, like whatever we arrive at as consensus, let that inform the management decisions. Because I do think that we could get buried at 10,000 feet of like the minutia of things because we haven't solved the 30,000 foot question
Okay.
first.
But is this a 10,000?
10,000 seems so high.
This is the 10,000 or the 30, you see. I mean, this, the,
He's saying this one's close and the challenges questions are bigger.
Yeah.
Well,
In the notes, could we just call it a 10-foot?
I'm seeing this now, I think, in a new light, which is
Or
that
metric.
we've got two documents. Actually, this, combined report is already sort of has two parts to it because there's not necessarily, there's overlap, but not necessarily agreement between what the two subcommittees put into this subcommittees document. But the idea was to identify challenges. They weren't called that at the time, but I think that's what it was. And then we have a new attempt to identify and resolve challenges. So to me, the way forward is to combine the two. And we have a subcommittee that's been working on the recommendations for an RFP and has produced the document that's the challenges document, that's worked on the challenges document. Well, no, that's worked on the RFP plan, which is further down this item on the agenda, but also, that overlaps with the challenges document. So, yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm seeing is actually there are three documents that really should be merged rather than treating them as separately. And if the RFP subcommittee can do that committee right now is Brad, Daniel, and myself, we might want to expand or change that subcommittee, but
what were the three though, Ian, I missed the.
I'm sorry,
What would be the three documents?
to merge the three documents into
Which-
one,
Which are the three, the GMPs?
the what's presently called the subcommittees document,
Yeah.
which is the result of last summer.
Those two.
The RFP plan, the RFP plan proposal, which includes more than an RFP. It includes a lot of material that would be presented to a writer. And then the third one is the challenges document. So merge those three into one, which becomes recommendations for management plan revision.
But
I think-
we'd have to okay each one of those still, right? Down the road, I mean, down the road, we could do the merger, but we still need to discuss all three of them. Right, in a full.
Well, we shouldn't lose any of the material, but I think I'm saying don't duplicate the effort between these three documents. Let's merge them into one and into the
I
format
don't-
challenges and how to resolve them.
Ian, I don't see how the RFP would play into this. Because this is a very specific trail stewardship. The subcommittee doc is a very specific trail stewardship one, which is really different than the RFP, and the challenges questions go well beyond the trail stewardship. I think I want to step back. I think we're getting really caught in the weeds here. I think our main objective for the moment is to take these points of contention, these things that are just like knotty, and trying to work those out so that we can move all these other documents forward.
Yeah.
So that as a committee, we can sort of say, you know what, here's what we're doing about zones of influence. We might have slightly different perspectives on it. We may not agree totally, but as a committee, we've agreed like, this is how we're going to treat this.
Mhm.
I think that is the most important thing, and that these other documents, like, who knows what will happen with some of them, but then we can use that information to inform it. We can start moving stuff forward because we're really caught up on these issues that we keep sort of like circling back to because they haven't been resolved. And that's what I kind of think of as this 30,000 foot view of things is like,
Yeah.
we're not talking about this particular trail and the zone of influence relative to a sensitive area. We're talking about this concept in general and how we're going to treat it. So, I mean, I think in terms of moving forward with this meeting, I think we could do one of two things. We could either have committees do a quick report out of any progress they've made and then jump into our challenges conversation, or we could just jump into the challenges conversation. And then whatever things get resolved, remain unresolved, can get funneled back into those committees for further sort of like review and potential like, I don't know, pathway formation, right? Like trying to figure out what would be the consensus for those.
I guess I just got to come back and say, I'm concerned that we're duplicating or even triplicating effort by having 3 different documents, all of which ultimately have the goal of making recommendations, proposals for the management plan revision. That's the end product, is a new management plan. And all 3 of these documents are directed towards identifying changes that are needed in the management plan. So now let's not have 3 documents that are potentially contradictory about the issues.
I just think that the subcommittee and the RFP are they're totally separate documents. I mean, I think combining them is going to be like,
I do
That's
too.
completely different. The person who is hired from the RFP will have access to and use these documents, but they don't need to be merged together.
Well,
They have very different purposes.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't want to be the hired writer in that case, because there would be a high probability that I would look at these 3 documents and say, well, I'm supposed to be working with these 3 documents, but there's contradictions or disagreements between them. So the onus is on the committee to condense it into clear recommendations for the management plan that the writer will implement. We don't want the writer to have to resolve contradictions or
No, but those 3 documents might just, they may not get the 3 documents at all. They might get a document that says, here's how we're gonna handle, I don't know, trail monitoring, traffic monitoring or something.
right.
Make it, make it read well, make it clear, make it look right and organized. But I think it gets too weedy if we start giving them like, these documents we discuss in the challenges list. And so on. I would almost say we would want to me, my instinct would be to take the existing MP2 draft, revise that as, from our discussions as we feel what needs revision, and give that to the writer. And then say, make this, improve the organization, improve the syntax, make the lines, make it more readable, so on and so forth. Basically, write as whoever Nick and company and Jesse did to create MP2, basically do that. And then hand that piece, and then we all bless it and everything. Everyone's happy with it. Hand that over to the writer and say, all right, this is nice, but it's, 42 pages long. It's kind of a slog. How can you improve it? So it's sort of like a super editor is almost how I see the person than a writer.
I agree with you that I think the person is a super editor, and I think we're spending a lot of time right now talking about how we're going to organize things to hand to this person instead of actually focusing on the actual
The
issue.
issues.
I don't think we need to worry about that. I don't even think we need to hand that person, here's an MP2 type document where everything is neatly, we just need you to redo this more organized. I think that a person who's experienced will be able to say, here's our trails report, here's our comprehensive management plan report, here's this other nebulous document, that they're going to be experienced enough to read through them all and assimilate those. We're not hiring a junior high schooler to do this. So I think that, I think if this is okay, I think our time is really going to be well spent to kind of really get going on these issues and not worry about how we hand them so much to the person. That person comes back and says, oh, this is too many documents for me. Can you merge these? Then, okay, we'll do it. But
With respect to junior high schoolers, but yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I absolutely agree with that.
Cecilia, you have your hand up? Oh, you're on, you're mute.
Cecilia
I
is
know.
muted.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say something similar to Melissa, that I think we don't have to craft a document that they would copy edit. I think we give them all this stuff and give them the vision we're looking for, and they can still point out, they don't have to make decisions. They can point out, okay, I see 3 different paths here, belongs in this part of the document. You're gonna have to make this decision. I think that the right person would be able to do that for us.
Mhm.
So that's almost like the writer is a facilitator
Mhm.
more than a
Editor.
editor.
An integrator, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah, integrated, I think.
Where conflicts come up, the writer's gonna have to come back and say, look, you guys, I gotta,
What do you mean here?
like,
Right.
what do you
Yeah.
mean? I got contradiction.
and
If there's contradictions, but we need to do the best we can. We need to use this time the best we can to like resolve those so that that person will have the most minimum amount of those possible.
right, because we don't want to waste their time when they ask us a question. We spend 2 months talking about it. We want to have the answer of like, nope, we've talked about that. Here's what to do about, you know,
We won't have the money to do it. And this is not cheap.
right,
This is
right,
not gonna be a cheap
exactly.
process.
So one other way we could approach this is jump into the sticking points now.
Yeah, let's do it.
Go through those. We'll have Brad's notes from that. And then we'll have this merged document that the subcommittees document. And then we can go back to the original 2 documents and say, after the sticking points conversation and these notes, how do we want to
To revise them.
revise them?
Yeah.
And then we have
If we
2 things.
Yes.
But we can do it straight on those documents, item by item, and just knock them out.
Let's do it.
Mhm. Yeah, that sounds great.
Sticking points?
Yeah.
Right on time. but-
A little bit ahead. We're 6
Yeah,
minutes ahead.
10
Let's
minutes
get into
ahead,
it.
yeah.
So reorganizing the town
Cookies always do
website
that.
doesn't really seem
More sugar.
in the conversation as it's proceeding.
Why don't we get
Should
into
we
the
move-
challenges and we'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just put that on pause for a second. I don't want to keep getting sidetracked like that. Do we want to start with I'm going to throw it there to the group. Does anyone want to start with a particular category? It would be really nice in the time that we have. I don't think we'll get through the whole doc, but if we can start picking off categories and questions, and that would be great. Does anyone have a place they'd like to start? We've got sort of a bunch of 4, 5 different headings.
Let's start at the top.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first one is making ecological protections aspirational, and it says easement, town plan, zoning regs, and the management plan provide a listing of desirable ecological protections based on scientific research. Which, if any, human access requirements should supersede those protections?
And can you say just a few more words about?
Yeah, Ian, actually, would you mind just bringing this document up? on
Yeah,
the
I'm
screen?
looking for it.
Oh, okay.
The challenges questions one.
Yeah,
that's
yeah, oh,
what it is.
perfect. Yeah, if you could share that, that would be awesome. So it's just that
Yeah,
top
there's
one
one.
I read.
Yep. there it is.
So what does that mean, Danny? What, we're asking if human access requirements should supersede protections.
Yeah, Ian, did you modify those questions? Did you write the italicized version? Ian, did you write the italicized version?
Probably, I sent out the list the list of challenges with the request to committee members to generate questions. So I think in most cases, I wrote the question. In a few cases, they came back from other committee members.
Okay.
What does that, I'm sorry. Who posed this challenge and exactly what does making ecological protections?
I did
aspirational
that.
mean to that person? Can you be?
Yeah,
I'm not sure
because
Can you specify?
Yeah,
what that means
absolutely.
exactly?
the new MP2, we call it, the new draft. It says that, where ecological and I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it in front of it, but where ecological considerations can't reasonably be met, we'll drop them. We'll put the trail in over them. So ecological protections, it's a loophole. It was a loophole actually in the original one, where, where there's a conflict, recreational trail needs, building trails will trump ecological protections. And to me, the documents up there, especially the easement, there's nothing there that says that. In fact, well, the easement has 4 purposes. There's no hierarchy above, ecology is not above recreation. Recreation is not above ecology.
And so did you propose a solution?
Yeah, I think we can meet all of those. If we look at the forest as a whole, we can do ecological protection in parts and then lean more towards recreation in others. But to say in the whole forest, we're going to let, the trail interests be basically mandatory, and ecological stuff a nicety. I think that's a violation of the easement. It goes against the town plan, which leans way over on the ecological protection, says very little about recreation.
So how would you write it? If you're proposing a solution, how would you?
I would just take it out.
You would just take
I would
that
take it
sentence
out and say, follow the easement. And meet everything that's in the easement. Don't say that, item B in the easement is the most important one. They're all important, A, B, C, and D.
Yeah, but I agree that there should not be one that supersedes another, and that's how it's written. But believing that doesn't solve the tensions, because that is what creates the inherent tension about finding the balance, about where it makes the most sense to put a
Right.
trail, where it makes the most sense to not put a trail.
Right. So we need to, I think we need to look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you think we're framing it as two recreation or ecology when like there's plenty of ways to honor both in almost every situation?
Well, I think the language does that, unfortunately, and that's what I don't think we should say or. Yeah. But I think the language in the management plan does frame it that way, Chase.
So maybe someone generates a paragraph that places the 4 criteria equally. And doesn't just
Or pick it up from the easement.
pick it up from the.
Say, here's the way we do it.
Right.
And just throw the easement in there.
Yeah, but
And then-
I'm not sure the easement gives us enough guidance on that to resolve it. I mean, the easement is more vague than the management plan, so it's not gonna resolve the
I
tensions
agree,
that the
yeah, the
management
easement-
plan raises.
Well, but the language that's there now doesn't really resolve it either.
I know.
I think if we had a policy that said, parts of that forest that are ecologically important and for all the reasons, actually, educationally, forestry, even practically, what can the town do in a certain part of the forest? If we said in those parts, we lean towards ecology. In these parts, because there's better reasons, we go towards recreation.
Mhm. So you're talking about like a new zoning arrangement for the forest?
I think that would,
Could 2 people, Brad and one other, this is just an idea, work on that paragraph for the next meeting?
well, maybe more than a paragraph, but yeah, I think it's a fundamental thing in the plan, but. yeah.
Okay. So that it comes back, at the next meeting, we work hard to address this pinch point.
but what is the task there exactly? So I like that idea. I'm into it. I think the way that it's framed here is a little confusing because I mean, I don't think anybody's advocating for human access to supersede environmental protection, which is how it's currently framed. I think what you're asking is
It says that.
how to resolve the tensions between the four objectives? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying take that out, because right now it puts human access above.
Brad, do you know where it says that? I
I
don't
think it does,
I don't
Brad. I think what
I-
it says is,
It's in,
I don't
it's
think
in the
it's-
recreation part.
it says that exactly. I think it says more like, we'll try.
It says strive, but
Strive,
what
right? It
worries-
doesn't say-
what worries me, though, Melissa, is that I don't think it's too, they strived and they gave up, and they being
Well, that's,
one of the previous committees. And we saw it happen. I mean, they put 3 trails, and we've been over this, but they just hammered that northeast corner with trails by saying, well, there's nothing else we can do. You know, the landscape is too rugged over here, so I'm sorry, we gotta put it through the hemlock thing, you know, we gotta go through the dry oak forest.
So
We have-
could Brad and somebody else for the next meeting work on this pinch point challenge?
Yeah, I'll do that.
I would do that too with you, Brad.
Yeah, so maybe it's 3.
And with
One
reference.
question, would some of this be addressed when we're talking about zones of influence and buffer zones?
It well comes down to that, yeah,
think so, yeah.
because when
And
you're talking
If
about,
we come out of that with some specific, I don't know, with more specific language, maybe that'll inform this,
oh, I think.
because that's an
Definitely.
item
Right.
down on our
Yeah,
list.
I think those are absolutely
Tie,
intimately related.
tie it in.
So maybe that'll solve this.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Put both of those on
I
your
just
list.
ask one more question about
Yeah.
when you're working on that paragraph, that I think the goal of trying to do these is to bring something back that we can like discuss, of course, but then try to vote on.
Yeah.
So we can just like, okay, here's this chunk, we're moving forward from.
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Right,
I
and,
agree.
and where does it go in the document? Or
In the
documents?
yeah, that's important to identify where in the management plan we're
Yeah.
changing something or adding something. And Brad was suggesting use the existing, what we're calling MP2, which is not the current management plan, but you know, the one that's been worked on over the last.
I actually think
It
that
is.
maybe the most important part of that would be to identify in the management plan where the sort of tension areas are, right? So we know exactly what we need to change, and then we come up with the language, and then we reincorporate it.
Excuse me.
So I think that could be part of what the 3 of us do as well, is we're like, not only do we have the new language, we found here are the 5 parts where we're gonna modify.
And this is
Yeah.
what Cecilia was saying. in
Yeah.
that chat thing.
Okay, great. Can we go on to, Ian, can you just close that chat real quick?
No.
Or minimize it or something, move it. Action versus legislation. Oh.
Who put that one in?
What is this?
That was mine.
That's
Oh,
Chase.
Yeah.
Chase, do you want to say anything about that?
I think I come to that as like admittedly a much more action oriented person in any group. And I'm not the most patient, but I get stuff done. And so I need to be counterbalanced in that. So that's like, I'm saying that. But I do see the possibility that we could be in an endless loop of rewording the management plan.
Yeah.
Rather than, spending 50% of our time working on legislative stuff and 50% of our time like out in the forest doing stuff, or like Brad and I are trying to come up with a monitoring program that feels much more concrete, or like what you're doing with Velco, right? And so being aware, like, is there any logical end to rewriting? Because wording is important, but it's not the only thing.
So that's something we need to be always mindful of, but we don't need to address with 3 people. We just need to be mindful that we got to get through this.
Yeah, and I guess it connects to like what I hear from the community a lot is like, you guys have been working on this for
7 years.
yeah, is anything ever coming? And
Right.
I mean, I like giggle, I'm like, we're working on it.
Right.
I mean, unless we wanted to set a timeline, like that might, if we say like, here's the order of operations and we know when we start getting behind, I mean, that could be one way to address, which I think is a really valid point of like, how do we keep on task?
Right.
And that's actually something that I went back to with Nick's previous timeline. And there's obviously like, it was a different kind of thing, but why don't I at least work on revising that? And I can bring that to the committee of like, here was that timeline and here's a potential new one. And that's good for me as co-chair to just like have that in my mind and try to keep us on task.
And I think I'm reading this challenge, action versus legislation, as it really boils down to how much are we going to resolve within this committee and how much are we asking the writer to make recommendations.
I don't think that's.
Is
what-
that
that's-
I don't know really where this question came from.
No, it was more about like, we're never gonna have a perfect document.
Right.
And on one level, that it's important to have things spelled out, but on another level, it's important to get out in the forest and have hands on the forest and, do some monitoring and know the forest and be involved, maybe planning some education and some different things beyond just
Right.
document creation.
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
That's like 7 years of cool education programming that didn't happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We could be working on like getting Richmond elementary school kids out there and we're not. And so,
It's really true.
great. Mandating specific trail routes. Does anyone remember who did this? This one, if they want to
It might have been me.
expound on that.
Might have been me. To me, it kind of goes back to the other thing too, but I think that there's a conflict of interest there when we mandate a route. It sort of supersedes all the process that ought to go into selecting our routes, whatever they are. It shortcuts it.
What do you mean by mandate though?
Well, in the document, MP2 names particular trails that we're gonna have.
It came from the
And-
trail proposal?
Pardon me?
They came from the trail proposal from,
No, that was written well before all that. I mean, it's 2 years ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. I forgot when MP2, I lose
I know,
track of
I
my
know.
years. No, it says we're gonna have trails here, particular trails here and there, not even. MP1 talked about a concept of different, but it said, well, we realize, we can't necessarily guarantee that. MP2 said we're gonna have trails here, we're gonna have a connection to this, here. Without it, there's been no review of that, really no review, no discussion, and no vote, in a public sense on whether that makes sense, does that conflict with the easement? Does it conflict with the town plan? Can we afford what it's gonna take to build and maintain those particular trails? But by putting it in the management plan, it just kind of makes, well, why do we even bother having a management plan? Just put it in, we're gonna have connections and go away. Forget the other 43 pages.
but,
because
I'm trying to understand, like, when you say there was no discussion about the trails that are proposed in the management plan, wasn't that like the bulk of the discussion for a really long time? How was there no discussion?
they weren't really discussions.
What were-
The public brought up issues, me included,
Yeah,
and then were swept under, I'm sorry, but they were swept under the rug, in my opinion and a lot of other people's opinion. They were never really back and forth
So
discussion.
I'll work on this with one over the next month.
Okay, great.
Melissa, you sent some comments when you thought you wouldn't be able to attend the meeting. Are they relevant here? I thought they were relevant, that you had some comments about connectivity.
Mine are regarding, my comments are not regarding this. My comments are very specific. My challenge was very specific. It was the next one, which is connecting to adjacent landowners. And I thought that the task was to propose a very specific proposal to just throw out to you, which I have done, which when we get to that, I'll do that.
Great, thanks, Mark.
So maybe those two are connected. That's one, that's.
I didn't think- Mine's, I got like very, like, I thought you were asking us to bring like here's a plate of cookies to vote on, and so that's what I have. But it's not great things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess thinking about them is we're gonna dig into sticking points. Here, that like, this is one that is one where I think there's a lot of passionate feelings out there, and so it's worth putting them all out.
Yeah. That's the old elephant in the room.
Yeah,
It is. And I think though, so I like your willingness to get in there, Preston, and I'm down to work on that with you and whomever else. I'm wondering though, if really what you're saying here, Brad, is not, should we talk about trails in the management plan, but when we talk about trails, were you given satisfactory, did you feel like due process was respected when the
Right.
trail discussion happened?
Right.
Which is a little bit different than this. I mean, because at some point, trails have to be declared somewhere, whether it's the management plan or the trail stewardship plan or whatever.
Well, yeah, but
But your question is more about the process to reach the decision about what trails should be proposed. where.
yeah, and the content of the plan, I mean, the plan ought to say, here are the criteria.
Yep.
For putting in new trails, instead of just saying, hey, we're gonna put a trail over there.
And
And then here are the criteria without even addressing whether that trail over there, matches those criteria. That's all. In the connectivity, if that trail, if it says mandating, I mean, maybe it should have been written mandating specific trail routes or connectivity paths or routes, but it's similar, because it does, when it gets into connectivity, which is kind of maybe a subsection of this, there's other issues that come up, issues with the adjacent landowners. But even within the forest, I don't think the plan would create a conflict of interest in the plan. We say, here are all these great criteria for putting in a trail, and we all discuss those and agree on it. And then we say, okay, and then we're gonna have a trail here. But without even looking at whether that trail meets these criteria that we have in the plan and then in the external documents, we need to.
So it sounds like what you're saying, your proposed solution is create trail building criteria.
Yeah,
And those don't already exist in
And that,
the
that's in
work
here,
that
isn't it?
was contracted by the committee?
you don't think so?
There's no criteria at all listed for
No.
I don't think
anything
that's-
anywhere.
Well, so I mean,
I mean, the criteria it's in the easement, it should be in the something, could be drawn from what it says in the easement, what it says in the town plan. Or it could say it should conform with the town plan and just let it go with that at that. It doesn't have to reiterate everything. I think there's something in there about the process of trail development, how they're proposed, how they're reviewed, maybe. I wish I didn't bring my copy with me, unfortunately.
well, I mean, I'll just speak from sort of my both trail building background and my ecological land management background, which is that the criteria used, there's different criteria used for each task. And that criteria was, especially from the ecological perspective, was the things considered were the management plan, but then also state regulations. And then also any like town specific regulations. So we could start with that. And I think maybe Brad, one of my like asks of you is, as we're going through this, if you could think about not just, I know it's helpful to say what doesn't work, but if you could help us think through like, what is the end product? What is the thing you'd like to see? I think we can kind of move some of this conversation forward to like, because I think it's pretty reasonable to say, can we identify the criteria that were used for trail placement? And do we as a committee agree with that criteria? Would we change it at all? I think that's a pretty manageable task. I think I'm struggling a little bit with kind of getting to that place where we can know what to do. Because I think we all know what we don't like, but I think we want to get to the place where we're like, okay, what is the thing we want to see? And so kind of what I'm hearing from you is a more robust set of criteria that we can analyze and we can discuss and we can say, we agree, we don't agree, but it provides a little bit of a framework for us in assessing trails.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. I think the biggest problem is just naming names. And just don't say we're gonna do this.
What do you mean naming name?
Don't name names. Don't say,
What do you mean?
don't
Are
say.
you
we're
talking
gonna-
about the connection to
Yeah.
Jericho trails?
Yeah, Sip of Sunshine.
Is that what this is
Yeah,
really about?
Well, that, because that's in there now, that's the one, mandated connection. And that hasn't, we haven't discussed that,
That's
we haven't
next.
truly
Let's talk about it.
discussed it.
Let's talk about it. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's mandated. I don't know what you mean by mandated, but.
Well, it's in there, in MP2, it says we're gonna have it.
The easement says, look for connectivity. It doesn't say where, it doesn't say how. And so that's what we need to talk about. And I
Wildlife,
have to-
wildlife connect, what the easement does the easement talk about connectivity? Well, anyway, that's
For just a
It's not too much
second.
detail.
No.
Hold on.
But I just want to point out one thing, Melissa, sorry, but so I mean, it would be shocking if this committee had not asked the trail design people for some criteria about how to build those trails and how to propose those, right? So I'm looking at the scope of work, the RFP that right when you were committee chair, you guys put out there for people to come and make proposals
Mhm.
for where this thing should be. And then there's three very clear criteria, which is to say, an ecologically informed, multi-use, non-motorized trail network to be enjoyed by walkers, hikers, runners, mountain bikers, and snowshoers, maximizing intact forest habitat, habit connectivity, and trail network connectivity.
And then
And then the design
Connect-
ought to follow the concept map as guidance, but not necessarily
to
as
sunshine.
strictly adhere it. I don't think it's in this one.
keep looking.
The design to emphasize special viewpoints and significant historical natural sites where possible. Yeah, I mean, I'll keep looking, but I mean, there are criteria that were used.
Yeah, but then it says, but connect to sunshine.
In the scope. of
Well,
work.
you know, that comes from the town plan that, and it's the guiding, like our
Yeah.
trail committee's guiding
Where in the,
principle is to seek opportunities to connect to neighboring towns via trail to provide those off-road opportunities for people. And so
Sure.
I wasn't on the committee at this point, but I'm guessing that there was advocacy for that mission from, from the trails people. You would know.
Well, I just want to say,
Oh,
you're
sorry,
you're right.
forgotten,
That's
but-
in there, by the way.
I mean, I'm guessing that's where that came from, right? It's because that's a big theme. The connectivity is a big theme in trails committee.
All right, I want to give Melissa a chance to speak,
Yeah,
and then
sorry, Melissa,
Delia
I
has
cut
her
you off,
hand
I'm
up,
sorry,
and I
I'm
want
sorry.
to.
I'll just take 2 minutes. I
Take as much as-
brought up connections to adjacent landowners, not wildlife, nothing like that was in my challenge. And I thought about connections to adjacent landowners as my challenge that I was concerned about. And I propose a solution, which I'm just throwing it out for discussion. It may or may not sit with you. And my proposal went back to how do we connect to adjacent property owners? And one of the main things that struck me about the connection to the property of Mr. Sunshine, who I just met recently, is that there is no trail covenant or deeded trail rights on his property.
Mhm.
Therefore, the next landowner, and Mr. Sunshine is not a young person, I hope he wouldn't mind me saying that. The next landowner of that property holds the right to refuse any travel on the trails over their property to connect to the Andrews Community Forest.
Yeah.
Therefore, my proposal is that we not connect to Mr. Sunshine's property, but build a loop in the southeast quadrant that is down lower and does not allow for road connections to be made through Andrews Community Forest from Mr. Sunshine's property.
Melissa, the Trails Committee is in the process of getting that covenant.
Oh, they are.
Oh, yeah, it's whatever the standard, like, it's revisited every 10 years.
Okay,
Uh,
so I
So
think,
that covenant will be
well,
in
okay,
place.
if a covenant is made, then I think it would be open again to considering connecting to his property, but I would not be in favor of moving forward with trail building to connect to his property until the covenant is secured, and we have that legal documentation.
This was something that our subcommittee looked into. And as a
Ian, can I-
result of that, I met with David Sunshine to see what are the regulating principles on his land relating to trails. And, you know, we wanted to make sure that.
Ian, I want to make sure
Cecilia.
Cecilia's next, okay?
next.
Melissa,
finish?
do you have any more? Okay, thank you, Melissa. Yes, Cecilia.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, it's hard to unmute. So I'm just looking at MP1 because I know it specified a couple things about connectivity, and under the trail concept, it had the trail concept map, but then 5 bullets that the map was of the actual concepts the map was supposed to be illustrating. The first one is establishes connectivity between public mapped trails to the east and west of the property. So as I recall, the plan that came out of Sinuosity and Arrowwood didn't fully connect. Like to VYCC, there was some issue there, and I'm not sure why. And then in 2 other places, it talks about specifically connectivity or explore options for connectivity between the forest and Richmond downtown. So at least in the prior version, there was definitely concern for connectivity. They did not name Sip of Sunshine, but it was, you know, part of their concept map. And I'm not sure if that east-west issue, I mean, would Sip of Sunshine be considered north, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if the why that might not have been included in the criteria for the contract with Sinuosity and
I don't know if it was there at that time.
Like, okay.
Sip of Sunshine?
When the first management plan.
well, I remember us talking about it, like, oh, it's up there, and they drew a little map that I think the concept map goes all the way up there. Yeah, it goes up. And we even had maps that showed Sip of Sunshine. We had adjacent landowner maps and stuff. Not all of them made it into the plan, but they're probably in some file folder somewhere. And it was the SE Associates that drew that first northern line on the concept map. And then I don't know what we decided to do about, I think I heard from Daniel that maybe VYCC did not want it to connect because there were differences in how, what was allowed on each side of the border or something.
Yeah, VYCC is open, but my last conversation with them, they're definitely open to connecting. They need to figure out a couple of things on their property. And also the existing connecting trail was part of the VAST, which is a not very sustainable trail. So we would need to, as the committee, sort of reroute or redo or harden the existing VAST trail to make that connection. And that's why, as is, it's not a sustainable trail that goes to VYCC. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Melissa.
Yeah, but it's just to go back. I mean, we obviously can change things. That's the whole reason why it's said underlined and bolded in very many places that if we depart from the concept map, then we need a complete revision because it means we're departing from what we intended to do the first time. So I just would love if that were still on the table, if we think an east-west connection, if connectivity is important, you know, can we continue to explore that with VYCC and actually count that in our mileage as mileage seems to be a criteria for, or density or whatever, about how much is too much trails for wildlife. That's all.
Yeah. Go ahead, Melissa.
I would like to propose then, hearing that there's some work being done to secure a covenant and deeded access through Mr. Sunshine's property. My proposal then is that trail building proceed in staged levels such that we are waiting to hear if Mr. Sunshine has secured a deeded access and covenant on his property for trail access into perpetuity. And so we table that connection and building that until we hear, or maybe there's a time frame we can hear around how that process is going, and you know, move that to the side and stage trail building until we make a decision.
Well, yeah, I can bring back a
Until we.
timeline from Trails Committee.
Line and how that's going and, have that document secured.
We can I can talk to VYCC about that too, to see, where they're at.
So I won't, so a couple of things. I heard Chase say, agreements with landowners that have a life of 10 years and are renewable. What I heard, correct me if I'm wrong.
I think, I don't know the total, there is
Okay,
a
well, I'm not,
standard that I was trying to
Yep.
pair a quote, and
right,
I don't want to be totally quote on that, but
right,
there's,
so no
it
quote given.
renews every once in a while.
Right. What I'm hearing Melissa say is, something in perpetuity, and that's a trail easement in perpetuity. So those need to be discussed, because they're, I don't want to speak for you, but when you're saying in perpetuity, that's quite a bit different than renewable or not renewable every 10 years.
Right, and I guess I didn't realize that and every 10 years was on the table.
I think it's new to all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
that,
Right.
so I'm thinking, when I originally made that proposal, I was thinking into perpetuity because of money to connect,
Mhm.
time, effort, and what I call our environmental assets.
Mhm.
So I would have to really think long and hard about, okay, we're only getting a 10-year contract and we're gonna plow up on through there and connect. What does that mean if we only have 10 years on that?
Right.
So,
Yeah,
our
that's a-
return for our investment of doing.
That's a good
Mhm.
thought.
But I think the spirit of what you're originally were saying, Melissa, holds, which is that we want to do a staged or staggered trail, even development design, until we know there's some type of easement or covenant to an adjacent landowner, and we can decide as a committee whether whatever that ends up being, if that meets our standards. But we do want to make sure that there's something in place so that we don't just build, and then that's, like you're saying, money and resources that don't go that, are put to good use.
So, even have the discussion about it. I mean, because that wouldn't be the only, thing to talk about, whether that covenant exists. But
Well, I don't
even
wanna
to
go-
spend
I
our
don't wanna do
time,
anything until we hear.
but by
Right.
quote, doing anything, that starts with the discussion of whether we ought to have that in the first place. That's all I'm saying. It's not like go out there with shovels.
I don't want to have any discussion until we, except for what stage are we gonna build that doesn't impact.
But how about what stage we start discussing whether,
what stage
whether
we can
that-
do right now.
whether
without-
that's a good,
Right,
a
and then
good
when
goal.
we hear that information, then we
Yeah.
can synthesize.
We
that
can
and
put that
decide
in.
what-
So that's fine. It's awesome. It's very different than the way Vast, for example, operates. Vast, mostly statewide, has annual agreements with landowners. And that's how they built landowner rapport.
Mhm.
So their approach is, it's very different.
Sure. You can pull the plug at any time. if
Pull
you
the
don't
plug
like
at
what's
any time,
happening,
and
And that's part of the way.
Through goodwill on both parties,
Yeah.
most trails continued to go through. And I ultimately pulled the plug on Vast on our property in part because there was lack of snow
Mhm.
and bridges washing out, but there's no. So that's just information.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would guess from hearing, we're on a conference with the VIMBA chapter during our Trails Committee meeting. And VIMBA was talking about their standard landowner agreement. And I would guess it has plenty of outs for the landowner too. And it's really geared towards landowner buy-in and making landowners feel respected and heard.
Yep.
And so I wouldn't be surprised if the standard VIMBA agreement does have a lot of opportunity for the landowner to change their mind.
Mhm.
I'll learn more about that.
But I really
super
appreciate your point because the cost of trail building is expensive, it can be very expensive, especially when zoning is now being taken into consideration, and it wasn't previously.
Could we just take a quick look at the agenda? And I'm asking the question, do we want to continue with this, going through the challenges document? Or do we want to double back and address two things that we skipped? One is, the website proposal. And the other is the vision statement. I mean, I think it's up to this committee. Do we want to defer those two things and keep going on the challenges, or should we address those two?
Or this is, challenge, is this the last item on the agenda, was it?
Yeah.
We skipped.
So we're supposed to be over by 8?
Yep.
I mean, this is such a good discussion.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Yeah, I think we
moved on
can-
from those previous ones, so we could get into this
I
one.
know.
I would say we keep going.
Yeah.
The only argument I make on that website thing, maybe say it's something to do with it. I think I think it could help us down the road in using the website ourselves more than we can now, because it's a mess, I think. It jumps all over. You know, half of a topic here, the other half here. But
Yeah.
I don't know, if no one looked at that. I mean, if we have to start, if everyone, which I doubt. You know, if everyone had looked at the documents and compared it as an opinion, and could vote in 2 minutes to, yeah, take it to Duncan and do it, that'd be one thing. But if we have to wade through it,
Yeah, I think we probably, just for due diligence, wanna
yeah,
wade through, especially
yeah,
with
yeah.
like public comment too and
Absolutely.
stuff, so I'm inclined to let that one sit until next time.
yeah.
Okay.
But please look at it, so when we do
Yeah.
hit it, we can
So-
get that thing fixed up.
Yeah,
Is this, what's in the packet as sort of visualization of how the website would look, and then you've also created, but it's not in the packet, is this other document?
Right.
Which is the side-by-side comparison. Should this be, looks like this should be circulated to
That'd be
committee
great.
members.
I mean, I think this is a great way to start that, you know, to inform yourselves about it. They're just two outlines, the way the first one's laid out, what I'm thinking, and Sam and I, who did I work with? Sam.
Yeah, Sam,
Sam and
Thanks, Sam.
Ian, maybe Bob, can't remember now, it's last month. But anyway, yeah, you know, we sort of came up with that and said that might work better. But I agree, Daniel, that let's.
So the plan is defer the issue of the website, but put this in the packet for the next meeting.
Yeah.
And we can circulate it before we put it in the
Even
packet.
ahead of
and
time.
maybe what we could do is ask folks to make comments on that, and then with hopefully a motion to, maybe we could try to like approve that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
yeah, I mean, it's a huge service.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
jumble
did read through
documents.
it, Brad, it was great, it was much more streamlined,
That's the
and
kind of feedback.
yeah, I really appreciated that.
And the vision statement, should we defer that one?
I think we should defer, because that's like, I think that's gonna be a interesting one to get through, so.
Yeah,
But put it on the, I'm suggesting put it on the agenda for next time and have it as a action item to
Yeah, maybe after the challenges, if we,
approve
the brain
or
power.
modify.
I did want to make sure that I understood your thoughts, Melissa, on the connectivity piece. I mean, there's one thing about the sort of amount of time that it might require to make the proper investments, and is it going to be worth it over time if we only have a year commitment or whatever. But there was another piece about you're proposing a phased development and a southeast corner. Can you talk more about that? What were you saying? In your proposal?
So, I was saying if there's not a deeded access across that property, it hadn't occurred to me that it might occur. Access might be granted in year or 10-year increments. I was envisioning either it's put into perpetuity or it's not.
Gotcha.
But so that was the binary I was thinking about, and I was saying if a covenant is not put into perpetuity for deeded access through Mr. Sunshine's property.
Yeah.
Then we should build a loop in the northeast quadrant that does not connect to Mr. Sunshine's property and does not go so close that it would allow for a building of what you might, I don't know what they're
Mhm.
called,
Northeast,
illegal,
Social trails.
northeast or southeast?
northeast.
Oh, yeah, I think
Ah.
you said southeast.
The
Okay.
Yeah,
northeast.
so, and that's because Andrews
have-
Forest has like sovereignty over that piece and you don't have to depend on anybody else for,
And that's because if we link up to his property and then he moves away,
yeah, or
sells
something.
his property, and
Yeah.
the new property owners say, you know, we don't really like all these people coming over our property.
Mhm.
We're gonna nix this.
Right.
We've wasted all of our
Time and
assets of money,
Yeah.
time, effort, and environmental assets to
It
get
could
that.
go the other way too. The new owner could, you know, put parking lots in and,
Well,
you know,
I'm
and just dump people into the, I mean, it
Let
could
me
go
just-
either way.
let me
You don't
just-
know.
keep in my box here. I'm trying to be what the task was, which is
Yeah.
put something forward that's concrete. So, and then the second part was, you know, pending, now that I hear that that is in the works, pending that approval.
Yeah.
That we begin our trail construction in a phased manner with, something that is not in that quadrant that would be affected by whether there's a connection or not.
Yeah.
And we work on some of the other trails to get those started
Mhm.
and get building going there. And then that northeast quadrant, whatever the trails are gonna look like there.
Yeah.
Is awaiting hearing whether Mr. Sunshine is gonna put a covenant on, is that the right word, covenant? Or
It's very religious, but maybe that.
deeded access on.
We
his
call
lot.
commandments.
Command-
Yeah, there's usually 12 of them.
Easement is,
Easement.
There-
Stone tablet
Stone tablet
at the top of the ridge.
Sunshine, you shall pass here forever.
Yeah.
You shall
Or you shall
pass
not
here
pass,
forever.
yeah, right.
And right, you've got a stone obelisk on
An easement.
Snipe Trail,
it's at the town line,
the
yeah,
town line.
yeah,
But that's pretty cool.
yeah.
Okay, we don't have a ton of time, but I'm wondering if in this next section, we sort of talked about connectivity. And I'm wondering, I'm just looking at under the ecology, we have the zones of influence and buffer zones. And we've just sort of talked about this connectivity piece, and what I'm hearing from Brad, and Brad, I just want to make sure I have this right, but
Mhm.
you're looking for an opportunity to kind of like also look at the current trail plan and to say, hey, do we even want these trails in these places? So to not take that as set in stone. And I'm wondering if, so Caitlin and myself and Jesse, we went out and we walked the trails and we made those trail adjustments based on just the three of us sort of saying, all right, this could be pedestrian only, we can get rid of this trail. What I'm wondering is if there's a.
And based on the feedback from the meeting, right?
Yeah, and based on the feedback from the meeting. And I'm wondering if we could kind of have the same, not the same process, but like if you and I, or you and whoever else, and me and whoever else, want to just sit down and say, let's look at the trail map, let's look at zones of influence, let's look at our buffer zones, let's look at all these things. And are there places where we would move theoretically, right? Like move trail or get rid of trails, or,
Yeah.
you know, if we could, what I would love to see is if that sort of working group could propose something and say like, you know, actually here, we think this is like a better idea, and this is the original one. I'm maybe wanting your feedback on that, or do you think that would sort of satisfy some of your concerns around what I've heard about like mandates for certain things, or just sort of like an assumption that, you know, that was set in stone?
Yeah, no, I think that would be a.
Okay, I'll set that up.
I think that'd be great.
good call.
Now, is that a subcommittee meeting that takes place, for example, here or in a living room or on a walk?
I think, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I sort of think maybe the first meeting would be like just a working group.
Mm-hmm.
And without me, and then I think from there, if we said, okay, maybe we need to make this like an official subcommittee with a publicly informed meeting, we can do that. Or we want to do a walk or something, but I think we need probably like an hour or two to kind of say like, how are we gonna do this together? Yeah,
Some map.
If you do that, that sounds like a great idea. I would ask that everybody be invited on the walk.
Sure,
That didn't happen
absolutely.
Last time, so I was feeling sad that I didn't have an opportunity to go on the walk.
Definitely, we can, let me try to like make this work with open meeting law. I will communicate out any type of, no, it's cool, we can do this, but no, but I can, no, but I can communicate out activities and we can manage those activities with people in a way that everyone feels included in that. And that can look a number of different ways,
But it
so,
can't be a meeting.
right, but we can make
Okay.
it work, and I'll communicate out those things.
Well, one possibility also, I don't know how it overlaps, is to invite public.
Well, I wanna, yes. I want, down the road, let's keep this as a bite-sized chunk for the moment, cause I don't want it to get out of hand. But I think we can start with, I think Brad raises valid concerns, and I think we wanna make sure that we can figure out a good path forward for that, and then we can think about other additions to that. But I want the expertise of the committee to also be involved in that conversation when and where appropriate, so I wanna communicate that out to people so that we can make,
The walk is fact finding and not decision making.
we don't know if there's gonna be a walk yet, we will figure that out. We'll meet as a working group and we'll just figure out what we wanna do.
And who is the working group?
Well, so far it's Brad and I, and if anyone else would like to be involved with it,
And the task of this working group is the discussion on mapping and sensitive areas and.
yeah.
Trail
So-
placement.
Trail placement, considering zones of influence, buffer zones, connectivity, sort of wildlife corridors, things like that. And if and where we'd make adjustments to the current trail plan.
I'd be in that.
And I'd just like to note that working groups can have people who are not on the Andrews committee. So if there are people from the outside, particular expertise you want on that walk or the working committee, then that's totally legit according to this. So
I know what it's doing though, I like the idea, but meanwhile, Chase and Sam and I have a wildlife management plan that really has to, address those zones of influence and buffers. So I want, and our quick update on that, on the 10th, I think, Andrea Shortsleeve, from Fish and Wildlife we're gonna get together with her.
Oh, great.
And we're gonna talk over a kind of a draft plan we have. We have a plan for a plan.
Mhm.
We're gonna talk that over with her and, see.
Plan for a monitoring plan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Plan.
so how do we get to that?
Yeah.
How do we get to that plan? Sort of almost scoping maybe? I don't know. Anyway,
I'm almost imagining, you might be thinking of it differently, that like what we're gonna come up with is gonna hopefully be a long-term ongoing source of information that will continue to
yeah,
inform,
well, that's just like a framework.
but we won't get anything like conclusive
Yeah.
right away. It's literally long-term, setting up long-term monitoring for responsible management.
Right. And adaptive.
Yeah, but more than monitoring, I mean, that's one of the issues. John Clark is little, I talked to him and he's wondering about our ability to actually monitor wildlife. And how well we can do that. But what we can influence is the habitat and the hospitality, the hospitableness of that habitat to like certain species, not everything in the world, because it will go crazy. But
Right, you can
Yeah.
use certain things
man-
as proxies for habitat and,
exactly, the
yeah.
umbrellas, keystone.
right.
Stuff. So anyway, that's sort of the plan, but we're gonna see that. But anyway, so I wonder, are we gonna be stepping on that?
Well, but what we can
But
do,
we could still talk.
we can still talk and we can at least plan a process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they will be complementary.
Think it'd be
Yeah, I
okay?
think it'd be
Yeah.
complimentary. I do, and I'm glad that you're doing that on the 10th, because we could meet after that meeting.
Oh, okay.
And then that meeting could inform,
Okay.
and maybe even, now that you know that we're gonna do that, if there's an opportunity to sort of like, ask Andrea, like, okay, so given these things, like, what do you think about trails and how does that work? You know what I mean? And she might have some thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
yeah, we might be able to get her to zoom in or something.
Yeah, right.
Can I,
Timekeeper.
Oh, yeah.
oh, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so the committee, the subcommittee is 3 people. Can I suggest
Mhm.
an additional person,
Sure.
Chase? Because the energy of, I think your energy in trail location is important in an early conversation. So if,
Yeah,
and so if
Okay.
you're willing to,
totally.
And that's still sub-quorum, right?
it's still sub-quorum,
Yeah.
but you guys will do a lot of
Yeah.
good work to
Yeah.
on that.
Thanks, yeah.
Cecilia.
Yes, Cecilia, I see your hand up.
Yes, sorry, it's slow to unmute and mute. So one is, I think that's great. These proposed small groups work in the field, tackle some of these big issues. If there's a good way, I'm just asking for a good way to get that information back to the full committee, along with some of the nuance and the insights that you've developed, by working together on that, because some of that might have gotten lost. And I think that may or may not have been part of the frustration that Nick and Caitlin and others felt, that they had worked hard behind the scenes in a sub-quorum way to get to a certain place, and then it wasn't appreciated fully or understood by the full group. So at any rate, if we have a good way to capture those insights as well as any decisions or recommendations, that would be great, for one. For two, I know we're closing soon. Is there a way, can we still add to this document? Because there's a couple of things that may be only thorny issues for me, but I would like to make sure that we consider it. And I don't know where the live version of this is. If there's just like a couple of bullet points I would want to add, to make sure that it's covered as we, revise the management plan, maybe 3 bullets.
Yes, Cecilia, if you wouldn't mind sending an update to Ian, and then Ian, if you wouldn't mind updating the document and then just sending it out to the group as like, maybe we can just keep an updated version of it.
So just maybe do it, a couple of comments and track changes where I think they belong, or maybe just a couple of bullets directly to Ian and he can put them wherever he thinks they belong, something like that.
Yeah, whatever you want to do, Cecilia, is fine, but I think I'm just trying to figure out how to like do this without it being open meeting laws in an email. I know we've had this in the past about like sharing documents, so I'm trying to just figure out. That's why I'm using like Ian as the intermediary to like, you give him info and then he just shares it with the group in there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Just really quick, Cecilia, do you have a preferred method for people sharing out? Like you posed the question of how does this information get shared out? Is there a way that you think would work well for us to do that?
Well, I don't know what kind of like notes you take or pictures you take, or, some places I've worked, folks went out and they come back and they do what they call a trip report. And it would just be for what other people in the organization needed to know about what they were doing there. So it doesn't have to be that extensive, but yeah, I guess sometimes it comes back and we get a couple minute update. Oh, this and that person and we went out in the field and we talked about X. And then it's like, okay, what were the insights? What were the questions that came up? Were there any specific sites of interest? So just thinking of it in a way that's both concise, but really captures the discussion that might have been happening in the field that we missed.
Okay.
Because I totally believe the best way to sort of unpack and resolve thorny issues about land management, forest management, is to have people walk the sites together who have different perspectives and be able to talk on site. And with these open meeting laws, you can only have a small number of people do that. And then the other folks don't have that aha moment. So you can capture the aha moments for the rest of us. That would be great.
Yeah, that's a good point, Celia. I'll think about how we do that. And we sort of have our mechanisms of sharing out, but maybe there's a written thing that we can provide that would be a little bit more robust. And I see Sam has his hand up, so I want to just get to Sam.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so I first wanted to respond directly to Cecilia. I think that that's a really good idea. Having been on a couple working groups, I feel like sometimes the efforts that are getting put into those are, they don't need to be prioritized, but I feel like they're somewhat pushed off. Like today is a good example. Like some of those subcommittee reports just kind of got pushed to the side and we were moving forward with other stuff, which is fine. But that also kind of happened last meeting as well with the website stuff. So it's I think if there was some way to share outside of meetings so that people could see the work that's being done and then maybe be prepared to respond to it. Because, for example, with this website redesign, if people had looked at that and approved it, it could have been just a quick vote, and then we could move forward with enhancing the website to make it more accessible for both the committee and the public. So I just wanted to respond to sort of how the working groups function, because I think work's getting done, but there's not always a good mechanism to report out what's being done. So whether or not that's allocating more time in these meetings, or if it makes sense to have some sort of public shared space where those like updates can be dropped, I think that would be helpful. So I just wanted to respond to that. I have a couple other comments, but I can wait and if we want to finish this discussion.
Pam, can I just say for open meeting law, we can't have the small groups do work and then just send it back to the committee. It has to be brought to a meeting, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we can't do that. We can do the other
Okay.
thing.
But I heard Sam say if it could be posted someplace publicly, so then it might be, maybe it's posting it, with the agenda for the next meeting, or, there are ways that we can access information. We have to be able to share documents and review them before the meetings. I mean, we just have to figure out the right way to do it.
Yeah, I just think it's important because this committee just always has so much to work on that it's not all going to get done unless the subcommittees are doing their work and then reporting out. So however, the most efficient way is to respond to the work that's being done so the actionable stuff can be addressed and voted on in these meetings would be great.
Yeah, Sam, you bring up a really good point, and we sort of like thought about that in terms of sharing out during the meeting, but as you pointed out, we're getting sidetracked because we have a lot of stuff
Yeah.
to do. It seems like it's not sufficient enough, that maybe we also need some written documentation. So I appreciate your comment, and that's good feedback for us as we do this for the first time and then figure out how to best communicate that. So I think that's just
On this
helpful feedback.
question of having information available between meetings, rather than waiting for the packet to go out with the agenda, which is maybe just 2 days before the meeting by either requirement for posting an agenda. There's a possibility, which is that we could post important things on our town website, the page, the committee's page on the town website.
Yeah.
So is that, I guess if a subcommittee wants to put something out for public comment ahead of the meeting, we could ask Duncan to put it. I can't,
Yeah,
I'm
that
just
can
trying
happen.
to see a way
Yeah.
to make information available. That's the only one I can think of.
Right.
I think there are also concerns about transparency and like people being able to join those working groups. So if there was a way to share that out, then people who might want to get involved who weren't at the last ACFC meeting might have an opportunity to know what's going on and indicate if they were interested in contributing.
Mm-hmm. And Sam, we're gonna wrap up pretty soon. So if you want to make your other comments now, this would be a good time, and then we'll wrap up right after that.
Sure, yeah, I'll keep it quick. I wanted to respond to Melissa's thing about connectivity. I think that regardless of connections to the abutting land, I think that taking sort of a tiered approach to trail building might be beneficial anyway, especially as we're gauging the effects of the human activity on the wildlife in the forest. So I agree and think that sort of developing under the power lines or, would be the smartest thing to do first, unless it's going to cost way more money to split it up. I already spoke to the website and how I would love if we could make time for that next meeting, because Brad and I have been kind of ready to go on that for a little bit now. And then finally, I mean, it sounds like might be getting too big and a little unwieldy, but I am potentially interested in at least listening in on the working group, discussing some of these zones of influence and like how we, decide where trails go, just because, I've been kind of involved with both RCC a bit, and then also this other working group where we've been working on the wildlife stewardship. So that seems to really dovetail nicely with the other things I've been involved with. But if you guys are kind of full up, I understand.
Well, Sam, I'll keep you in the loop. I've
Okay.
written your name down, and then I think that'll be consideration for like the group, but also yourself, like how much you want to be involved with. So I could just keep you in the loop, and then we can decide if that sounds okay.
Yeah, that would be great. If I could at least be kept in the loop, that would be sweet. And that's all I got.
It's an interesting, I mean, I'm not against him being part of it, but that's an interesting possibility because he can join you, but I could not because I would make.
Yeah.
quorum.
Yeah.
So
that's
just
funny.
being aware of that.
Yeah.
As you include outside people and the same person gets to do everything,
Yeah.
but a committee member can.
43 outside people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you for your comment, Sam, and for joining yet another meeting. We do need, before we go, we need to talk about when our next meeting is.
It should be on April 22nd. That's
Yeah.
the fourth Monday. And I think I, for one, and Melissa has communicated to me also that it would be really good if we can plan our agendas to match that regular time.
Yeah.
So unless there's any, I mean, we're still constrained by a quorum issue.
I think it's Earth Day. It's Earth Day that day. I don't know if that affects anybody.
I'll be away, but have the meeting anyway. which is
Okay.
fine.
But in principle, then we have a go situation for
I also will be away.
22nd.
So we can't have it that day.
On the 22nd?
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to as it stands unless we get a change.
School break.
Okay.
Oh, it's the school break.
That week.
Um,
29.
what about the 29th? Which would be like not the fourth Monday, but it would still be in April. It's the fifth Monday in
Last
April.
Monday.
I'm good. I'm good with 29th.
Probably is a select board meeting, in which case we can't have this room.
We can go in the other room, that's fine.
Do we usually do 7 o'clock?
No.
No.
Yeah.
Six. Right, would that work for you on the 29th?
I'm away for 2 weeks, so it's not gonna work.
Oh, that's not gonna work.
Right.
Okay.
I may have to be I have a 5:30 meeting scheduled right now that I will be a quick one, but it's in Burlington, and so I'd be out here by 6:30 at the latest.
Oh, I think that would be okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that work with everyone else on the 29th?
29th,
Okay,
good.
okay. We'll schedule for the 29th then. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, what time? 6?
6 to 8, yep. Yeah, and then Chase, that's fine to come whenever you. Okay, thanks,
I've
everyone.
never had a meeting at 6 PM on a Friday before.
Yeah, yeah.
And are we all gonna get
So much
beers
love
at
for
Adjourn?
That's right.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn? I guess I can't make a
Second.
motion.
Do you hear about the video that Master Naturalist did?
Yeah, that got sent out to everyone.
Do you guys see
It's really.
Brad's awesome socks?
I did notice those, yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's kind of for the camera.
Bart?
Bart Simpson.
All right.